Hi everybody, and welcome to Big Joe's Journal. My name is Joe Tilden, and I'm the host of this program. And here we are in the middle of winter, just about the halfway mark, really. And after January, which wasn't too bad, I think we're starting to get the effects now in February. This past weekend was a rough one. And right now we're having a little bit of a thaw, but toward the end of this week, things are supposed to get a little bit cold again. In fact, Friday, the prediction is that the high for the day will be 8 above zero. But when you look at everything together and what's going on in the rest of the country and the hits that they are taking with tornadoes and especially tornadoes and heavy rain, flooding out in the northwest, and tornadoes and high winds that are tearing apart buildings in the south central and southeastern part of the country, we haven't done too bad. Things get a little uncomfortable, but we haven't lost our homes, or we haven't had any serious property damage as of yet. And so far, we're not doing too bad. Well, what a 2 weeks or 3 weeks it has been politically. Let's go back to last Monday, the Iowa caucuses, and really hard to figure out, this system of your first choice, then your second choice, and your third choice, and all that. Seems they're starting to get it sorted out. And the result is there are 41 delegates at stake going to the convention. And apparently Bernie Sanders and Buttigieg have just about finished in a dead heat. Bernie a little bit ahead. But in the delegate count, the former mayor gets 21 delegates and Bernie gets 20. So that was Monday, and mass confusion. Nobody really knew who had won. Everybody was claiming victory, and nobody really knew what the results were, and I think they're still trying to figure them out, if they ever will. But anyway, it looks like Bernie squeaked through, and Mayor Pete came in second, and distant third was Elizabeth Warren. And I don't know, a big surprise, but back in fourth place, the former Vice President, Joe Biden, and the lady senator from Minnesota, distant fifth. So now they're all in New Hampshire, crisscrossing New Hampshire and everything else. And the big primary in New Hampshire takes place February 11th, which is tomorrow, from the day I'm taping this program. And by the time people watch this on Wednesday and Friday and next Sunday, the New Hampshire results will be known. And Bernie should be a favorite in this one. So it'll probably be Bernie and Mayor Pete, Elizabeth Warren. Fourth place, well, I think maybe Joe will hold on and finish fourth, and Amy will bring up the rear in fifth, and the other candidates will be out of the running. The fibber-in-chief, of course, goes to New Hampshire today. He's going to have a big speech tonight. And what he's trying to do is, take away the impact that the Democratic primary is having. Of course, he'll win the Republican primary, hands down, and be gloating about that. Well, we go on to Tuesday. And, of course, Tuesday was the State of the Union. And the fibber-in-chief goes in, and he's introduced. We go through the formality. He gets up on the stand, and he refuses to shake the hand of Nancy Pelosi. She offered her hand. He ignored it. Well, he goes on with his rambling speech, and, from a political strategy, it was not bad. He had a gentleman in there from the African-American community who had the Talladega Flyers, who flew planes in World War II, mainly flew them into the combat zones and all that, although they did not take place in combat. And this gentleman, 100 years old, he promotes him to Brigadier General. So that's his bid to the African-American community. And he also had another bid when he talked about education and an African-American student that the school policy he talks about is it was going to benefit, when actually the policy they put in place goes just the opposite. And he had his wife present the highest award that can go to an American civilian, presented to another scumbag by the name of Rush Limbaugh. So that award is tainted. And of course, that was done on TV. And, well, you know, scumbag. So he's got that award. And he continues to play it and really took advantage of a young family. The mother and the two young children were there, and he introduces them, and then he says, "But I've got another big surprise for you. Your husband can't wait any longer." And of course, in he comes, and there's that big reunion, and he looks great. And, you know, it's to me, it was very, very underhanded propaganda. Certainly, the wife having her husband coming back from Afghanistan, that is a wonderful matter, but it's a private matter. It shouldn't be on public display the way it was in the halls of Congress. You like to see families reunited. And especially when Trump pulls this one off and stages this, and that's what it was, to show that, well, I guess that he's in favor of veterans. He hasn't done much for them previously. The people that were wounded on that Iranian missile attack, coming down with concussions, which can be very, very serious injuries, he writes that off. Oh, they got a little headache, I don't know if that headache was as powerful as the so-called bone spurs that became public record in a doctor's letter. And you kind of wonder how much Trump paid off that doctor to write that letter. Well, that's something we probably will never know because he will keep that hidden. Well, we get to Wednesday. The impeachment trial is coming to an end. And everybody, the Senate is going to vote. The senators have taken their oath to be impartial, to render true and correct judgment. Unfortunately, 52 of them did not live up to that pledge. They perjured themselves. And we had a huge miscarriage of justice, a huge attack on the Constitution, and the Senate found Trump not guilty of the crimes for which he was charged. Well, all the evidence shows that he was guilty. And the fact that some Republican senators crumbled under Mitch McConnell's pressure, with the exception of Mitt Romney, and refused to vote. Well, I think Senator Collins from Maine joined Romney and the Democrats. 51-49, the Senate voted not to call any witnesses. Now, what kind of a trial do you have with no witnesses? It's made this a bigger farce. The Republicans did not want any more information getting out to the Republic about Trump's crimes and high treason. Should Trump have been convicted? Of course he should have. Going back to Article 2 in the Constitution of the United States, and let's go back to that. In case of the removal of the president from office due to his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of said office, the same shall devolve on the Vice President, and the Congress may by law provide for the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability, both the President and Vice President declaring what office shall then, who shall then act as President. All right. The office shall act accordingly until the disability be removed or the president, their new president, be elected. And of course, Article 2 talks about, the requirements to be president and so forth and so on. And we get into section 2, where it talks about things that the president has to do. And okay, it talks about powers invested in the president and the powers that he doesn't have. Herein otherwise shall be provided for, and which shall be established by law. But the Congress may by law vest the appointments of such inferior officers as they think proper in the president alone, or in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. And it goes on to talk about the removal of the president and what we mean, the very, very loose phrase of high crimes. The president, of course, can be impeached for treason, can be impeached for what they call high crimes and major misdemeanors. And this is a rather open phrase. Now, is the president guilty of that? Of course he is. The testimony given before the House certainly proved his guilt. And witnesses that would have come before the Senate would have given more information, which would have made his guilt more apparent. But Mitch McConnell, who at the start of this thing said he was going to walk hand in hand with the president's counsel, in other words, this was going to be a rigged trial, a rigged hearing, which it turned out to be, and he was acquitted. Well, what does he do? He starts bragging about it. You know, an individual like that, boasting about it. He beat the Constitution, he beat the law. And he takes retribution. He fires the people, good American patriots, good citizens, one a brigadier general with a Purple Heart that was wounded in Iraq. Fires people for telling the truth. He is such a liar that the truth hurts him. And the truth should have booted him out of office. But instead, we'll have to do that in November. People have to turn out and vote and take care of that little proposition in November. As the week goes on, it sort of brought back shades of what we call the Saturday Night Massacre. And those of you that remember that was Richard Nixon when he wanted the Attorney General at that time to fire the special counsel, who was Archibald Cox. And the Attorney General refused, so the number 2 man moves up. Nixon gave him the same order, and he refused. So finally he turned to the Solicitor General, Mr. Bork, and Bork did fire the special prosecutor, Mr. Cox. Of course, later on, when Mr. Bork was nominated for the Supreme Court, he failed. It was a Democratic-controlled Senate, and Mr. Bork was turned down. But he was given the opportunity to testify, and he had a hearing, which is something the Republican-controlled Congress would not allow any of Obama's nominees to get. So we go on with a very, very divided country, and a country that is more or less, things are kind of hanging in the balance. This farce of an impeachment trial held in the Senate is one of the low points, and going to go down as one of the low points in our history. When 52 senators failed to live up to their oath and didn't have the courage and didn't have the guts to stand up and do what was right. They've got to live with that. And hopefully some of them, maybe some of them, it's going to bother them. And hopefully it will bother their constituents enough so that they won't be returning in January. Very, very, very important that people vote in November. This election of 2020, probably going to be one of the most important in our history, probably since 1860, before the start of the Civil War. We're going to have to decide which way the country is going to go. Are we going to continue on downhill? Trump has not made America great again. He's knocked us down a few loops. We're right on the verge of playing second fiddle down to China. Whoever thought we'd ever come to that? We're looking at our allies who are looking at us and say, can we trust him? His word is no good. Can't believe a word he says. He stands up in front of Congress and he says, we're going to have a health care policy. Preconditions are going to be covered. And yet, as he's saying that, there's a bill going through the Senate that is going to say that preconditions will not be covered by Medicaid or Medicare. And there are senators looking at him and they know he's lying. Nancy Pelosi did the right thing when she took that speech and she tore it up in public, because it was just a total line of lies. He's claiming the economy is so good because of him, but it's not. The economy is doing well because of the rules and regulations that were set in by the Obama administration. The Trump administration is reaping the benefits. But he claimed that it's him. Since he took office, he straightened things out, but he hasn't. He's made things worse. You look at the situation in the Middle East. It hasn't improved, although he takes credit for it. The peace deal he wants to set up between another sleazeball from Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, he is under indictment in his own country, and he may wind up doing a little jail time, as I'm sure Mr. Trump will in the near future, once federal courts get a look at his tax returns, or lack thereof. Well, in all of this, of course, the New Hampshire primary. And the Democrats, they had a very good forum, I thought, at St. Anselm's last Friday night. I think they were fairly civil with each other. But now as you get down to the nitty-gritty, things aren't so friendly. Sanders is attacking Pete. Biden is attacking both Sanders and Pete. Amy isn't sure who she's attacking. Elizabeth Warren is calling for unity. And so on we go. After New Hampshire, I believe the next one in line is either Nevada or South Carolina. Either Nevada or South Carolina. And then on March 3rd, which is our primary day here in Vermont, that is Super Tuesday. And I believe 13 states will be having their primary on that day. And of course, Vermont, with our three electoral votes, doesn't really make that much difference, but we do have a number of delegates going to the National Convention. I believe Bernie will probably carry Vermont. In 2016, Hillary carried 28 states, Bernie carried 22. And Hillary was, even though she was a very unpopular candidate, she still beat Trump by 3 million votes in the popular vote. 3 million. Trump is a minority president. That's something he never talks about, something he tries to ignore. He always pats himself, this is the greatest, and I'm the greatest, and so forth and so on. Self-adulation. Anybody that would pay $10,000 so he can have a portrait of himself, you know, there's something a little wrong there. There's a superego, which is somewhere along the line it's going to be sunk. But Hillary, as unpopular as she was, she still won that popular vote. She did not resonate with the working class. She did not resonate with the African American vote. And I don't think she did as well as she should have had with the women's vote. Now, how many women could vote for Trump is beyond me. Way beyond me. How many African American could vote for Trump is a mystery I will never understand. But the Democrats, your 5 remaining candidates, and of course the 6th one will get in. Bloomberg will be in the Super Tuesday primaries. And I think he's going to do very well. Bloomberg is also coming under attack from Bernie Sanders. He's talking about, and Elizabeth Warren also is attacking him. Can't have millionaires buying the election. Well, Bloomberg, of course, is spending his own money, and he is opening an office in Vermont. He probably will open an office in every state in the union. And I think he's going to be very, very effective. How's he going to do in the polls? Well, I think he's going to come up in the polls. Right now, he's polling at about 1-2%. And the real test, of course, will come on the 3rd of March. When you've got your 13 states and some of your larger states coming in, who's going to come out on top then? And I think that's what Joe Biden is looking at. He admits he's a little surprised they only came in 4th in Iowa. And he's virtually written off New Hampshire. I think if he finishes 4th in New Hampshire ahead of Amy, he'll be satisfied. South Carolina, I think he'll do well in South Carolina because he is very, very popular with the African American vote. And I think in South Carolina, most of them will vote on the Democratic ticket. And I think Joe Biden will do very well there. Nevada's a toss-up. Could possibly be Pete. And from then on, of course, you get your huge primary. And then it'll really shake down and we'll see who your contenders are. Right now, it's down to the point where we've got the top 5. Some of these people that are still making the effort, I think it's time for them to hang it up. They're not going to be the nominee. Both of them are wealthy businessmen. And what they should do is say, all right, let's look at facts. Then I'm not going to be the nominee. I'm not going to win it. And drop out and pick a candidate whom they think can win. And, for my money, it has to be Joe Biden. I know he's made a lot of mistakes, and old age causes him to slip up. It does for all of us, one way or another. He has committed to picking a woman for his running mate. And I'm very hopeful that woman will be the junior senator from California, Karen Harris, or the congresswoman from Hawaii, but she's not polling that well. She's only at about 2%. But I think Senator Harris from California, she's got a very successful track record. She was the first female and African-American Attorney General in the state of California. She was elected a senator in California. She'd bring the ticket. First of all, she'd get the women's vote. She's very, very outspoken, very, very determined. Kamala Harris. She will, in all probability, be our first American female president. 2024, if I'm still around. I'll be in my 90s then, so I don't know if I'm going to make it that far. But she will be our first female president. That's a prediction I'm making right now. And if I could have any influence on Joe Biden, which I don't, if he picks her as his running mate, then I wouldn't be surprised if he's leaning in that direction. There'll be a real solid ticket that would send Mr. Trump packing. And of course, Joe, being his age, he's 78, he'd be 82, second term. I don't think he would seek a second term. And I think his vice president would become the Democratic candidate. And I think she's a very, as I said, a very outspoken, a very strong personality. I think she would be our first female vice president. Now, I know that if you want to talk about being catty, I know Hillary Clinton is not one of her favorites. And Hillary is being sued by the Congresswoman Stoddard from Hawaii for character assassination, because Hillary put her down too. And this lady in Congress, she is a veteran. She has flown helicopters in the Iraq War and also in Afghanistan. So she is a veteran. She has seen combat. And from her positions on a number of items, I think she's right on. And she would be a very good candidate to be vice president and a shot at being our first female president. But I would say Hillary wanted that, didn't get it. And now she's being rather catty about two women that have the opportunity to do that. To the point that she went after the Congresswoman, to the point where the Congresswoman has a lawsuit against her. And she's also gone after Senator Harris. But Senator Harris, I think, ignores it. She has not gone after Elizabeth Warren. The reason being that Elizabeth Warren supported her in 2016, was one of her strong supporters in 2016. So I think Hillary feels she owes that to Elizabeth, but she also might, you know, being fairly knowledgeable about the political process, she may realize that Elizabeth is reaching the end of the trail. I think it's just a matter of time, probably after the 3rd of March, when she hangs it up and drops out. And who's she going to support? Well, she probably will put her support behind Bernie. Although she did go after him for what she referred on public television of calling her a liar. I usually sit up at night and I watch the late night show on CBS, Stephen Colbert. And I think it's because of his monologues at the start. He does tremendous takeoffs on our fibber-in-chief. And well, he's had some great statements, and some of them are good, and some of them are true. But he did a takeoff on Bernie Sanders, you know, sitting in the impeachment trial. While the senators were there, they could only have 2 beverages. They could have milk or water. Apparently, Bernie had water. But the junior senator from Kentucky, Senator Rand, had milk. And it got Bernie a little upset for whatever reason. I don't know, but it did. But Colbert did a takeoff on Bernie getting upset over Rand having milk. And he talks about the 1% drinking 2% and so forth and on. And it was a bit of a takeoff. He has a comedian on that show that does impersonations of Bernie. In fact, watching him, if you didn't know that this guy was a comedian, he's making a mint imitating Bernie. But, you know, regardless of how you feel about Bernie, you got to give him credit. You know, he came into Vermont, virtually unknown. He lost a lot of elections at the start. But once he got going, he has gone right to the top. Could not help recalling that Howard Dean, when he ran in 2004, Iowa, well, he virtually ended his campaign, although he didn't end it until he lost New Hampshire the following week. But in Iowa, I think he came in 3rd, and he didn't handle it very well. And I think that hurt him in New Hampshire, and he realized, you know, that carrying on would be fruitless, and he dropped out. Well, with the election of Barack Obama, of course, he became chairman of the Democratic National Committee. And he did a great job handling Obama's 2 campaigns. And now he, of course, is retired. I don't know if he's back in the medical profession. I don't think so. I think he's just enjoying being an elder statesman. Well, with that, Remember, we're going to have an election here in the city. We're going to be electing 5 aldermen and their various elections around the county. So with that, may Almighty God, as in wisdom, continue to bless these United States of America. God love you. Have a great week. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks.